I wish I could take an advanced group of students and bring them with me. Unfortunately, that's not always possible to do. I'll try to do the next best thing, which is to not go into as much detail as this topic deserves. I'll just say the following. Throughout my Medina years, I was very much committed to the Athari Creed and to overall the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, which I will call the Najdi da'wah. I don't mean anything derogatory, but we have to call it something. Let's call it the Najdi da'wah. I don't want to call it the term that its opponents call it, because that is a derogatory term. But the Najdi da'wah describes a geographic phenomenon. As you know, Mahin in particular, and others you know, I wrote books on this. I taught lectures on this, Kitab al-Tawhid, Kashf al-Shubuhat, Qawaid al-Arba'a. Dare I say, to this day, nothing has been written in the English language that is more of an advanced defense of the Najdi da'wah than my critical analysis of shirk, which is still available in the English language. And I was genuinely sincere. But what I have discovered since then, and this is around a decade ago, and that's why I stopped teaching Light of Guidance, and Maghrib knows this, I stopped teaching, I said I can't do this anymore, is that I came to the realization that, by the way, I'm writing an academic book about Salafism as well right now, for an academic, published an academic book, so I'm doing a lot more research now than I did a decade ago. And to summarize, what I didn't know at the time was the following, that the Najdi da'wah can easily have, can be viewed to have gone through three phases. You have the first phase, the original phase, which is the phase of Ibn Abdul Wahhab and his immediate sons and grandsons, and the original, da'wah that started. And that da'wah, we'll get to that. The second phase is essentially King Abdul Aziz taming down the rebellion from within, because most people are aware vaguely that there was a civil war almost in Saudi Arabia, that King Abdul Aziz had to fight against his main allies who were defenders of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, because their view was that we need to go and conquer the world like our ancestors did. We need to wage jihad on the entire Muslim ummah and expand this thing called the Saudi Arabian kingdom. What is a kingdom? What is a geographic land? We need to go and fight all these infidels around us, meaning the other Muslim lands, like our ancestors did. King Abdul Aziz tamed them down, and a new strand developed. This strand is embodied by people like Mufti Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, the Grand Mufti before bin Baz. This is the second phase. The third phase is what we see now. And that is embodied by the famous scholars that most of us know. I have studied under some of them, and we admire and respect them immensely. Let's call this the third phase of the Najdi da'wah. Now, the third phase is tamed down. The third phase has expunged much of the more radical elements of the first phase, right? And that was the phase I was introduced to. And I fell in love with it. And I felt this to be the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the meaning of la ilaha illallah. Coming out of that environment and studying on my own and reading, I realized that the first phase and the third phase are radically different from one another. And Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab has doctrines and ideologies that the third phase dissociates from. The third phase says, no, he didn't really say that. He couldn't have said that. There's this tension that the third phase has with the first phase. And you even see this in my book, A Critical Study of Shirk, where there are things that he says, and then I say in the bottom, he couldn't actually have meant this. And that's what my teachers are teaching me. Don't take it at face value. I'll give you some simple examples. Ibn Abdul Wahhab fought decades of jihad in his lifetime. He and his group and army fought other people, conquered lands, expanded their lands under the name of jihad, not under the name of political war, under the name of jihad. Who was he fighting? He was fighting fellow Muslims. Who did he consider these people to be? Kuffar and infidels. He never once raised his sword against the British, against the Dutch, against any colonialist powers. His view was that the Ottoman Empire in its totality was a pagan empire. Dawla mushrika kafira. And that anybody who supported the Ottoman Empire ipso facto automatically became a murtad or a kafir. And in his view, therefore, anyone who supported the Ottomans against him, anyone, in fact, his famous 10 principles, Nawaqid al-Ashara, one of them is very clear, مَنْ لَمْ يُكَفِّرِ الْكَافِرِ أو شَكَّ حَتَّى فِي كُفْرِهِ, right? فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. Whoever doesn't consider the kafir to be a kafir, or doubts if the kafir is a kafir, that person is a kafir. Now, theoretically, that sounds technically correct. Who does he mean when he says whoever doesn't consider kafir to be a kafir or doubts whether that kafir is a kafir. He doesn't mean people that worship idols. He doesn't mean people that are, followers of another faith tradition. He means the Ottoman Empire. He means the Muslims around him. Whoever considers these people not to be kafir is a kafir. Think about the repercussions. And that's why there are plenty of statements in his own writings where he indicates that the only group of people who are truly upon tawhid are his followers. If you want to see what first wave Najdi Da'wah is, right? Have you heard of the book Millat Ibrahim by Abu Ibrahim al-Maqdisi, Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi, right? Mm-hmm. Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi's book is essentially a modern manifestation of first wave Najdi theology. Have you heard of Abu Mus'ab al-Suri and other of these clerics of the more radical side of the fringe of the jihadist movements? These clerics, they tap in to the teachings of Ibn Abdul Wahhab and his notion of wala and bara. And that notion of wala and bara was basically, if you're with the Ottomans, and that means you're not with his group, then you are not just a deviant, you are a kafir. Now, whether he made takfir al-ayn or takfir al-wasf, that's a debate. But the point is, the default is you're not a Muslim. And that is why this ideology was considered to be deviant by everybody else in the world. You want to ask me what my position is? Listen to me carefully, and all refuters, please quote this. Quote this. I am a follower of Imam al-San'ani and Imam al-Shawkani in their verdicts on this person. Imam al-San'ani and Imam al-Shawkani are great scholars of Sunni Islam. And some of them initially got some positive views about Ibn Abdul Wahhab, and so they supported him. When they saw the reality, al-Shawkani, the great scholar of Yemen, a great allama, al-Shawkani wrote a letter to the king at the time, the second manifestation of the Saudi Empire. He wrote a letter to the king, the emir, and it was publicized that basically, I'm paraphrasing obviously, is like, bro, chill. And that was his letter. Your group is taking things that might be bid'ah and making it into kufr. Taking things that might be wrong and killing Muslims as a result of this. That was his basic message. And that's my message as well. I'm not saying, a'udhu billah, that we should go worship or pray to the grave. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying we make our dua to the dead. But I'm saying that what this individual did in waging jihad and considering the rest of the ummah to be kafir is essentially what ISIS is doing in our times. The same mentality of everybody's a kafir unless it's us. Let me quickly finish up. I know you guys have to interject your thing. The second wave tried to tone that down, and that's Muhammad Ibrahim, and he was much more hardcore. You read his fatwa, I have them literally behind me, his fatwa, you can read them. Very great alim, but second wave. And then the third wave is toning that down even more and bringing it many notches down. I was introduced to third wave. Third wave gives you a lens, it gives you glasses to look at the first wave with. You don't really see the first wave the way that it was. How will you see the first wave the way that it was? Oh, advanced students of knowledge, this is my advice to you. Don't look at the writings of Ibn Abdul Wahhab without also looking at the history of what he did. Let his actions speak louder than later interpretations of his words. That's my message to the advanced students. I repeat, let his own actions, what he did to his fellow Muslims, how he justified attacking villages, how he viewed the Ottoman Empire and the entire ummah as being outside the fold of Islam, even if there's udr bil jahl, but they're no longer Muslim. Why? Because of things that he considered to be kufr akbar, shirk akbar, and the majority of the ummah did not consider to be kufr akbar, shirk akbar. My point is as follows. The Najdi Da'wah took its basis in the Athari Creed, no doubt. But it is my contention and the contention of Ash-Shawkani and of As-San'ani and of many ulama, including many of the Hanbali ulama of the time frame, including some of the great Hanbalis of the city of Ahsa, such as their Sheikh, the great alim Ibn Afaliq, one of their greatest muftis, a great Hanbali scholar who was Athari in his creed. But he wrote a refutation of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, which again I have in my library and it's available online, that he became a critic of Ibn Abdul Wahhab from the Athari strand, not from the other strand of Islam. I'm actually writing an academic paper which has been going on for many years, the differences between Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Abdul Wahhab. And there are profound differences. Of them, the most important one, Ibn Taymiyyah did not make takfir of his opponents that did the same things that the opponents of Ibn Abdul Wahhab did, and he made takfir and made them halal at them. So to respond to part one of your question, I have to admit, I no longer consider myself to be a follower of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, where I used to 15 years ago. But 10 years ago, around 10 years, or more than a decade ago, facts became clear to me that, and I said, and the fault is my own, but I will say third wave Najdi Da'wah sanitizes first wave Najdi Da'wah. And that's why the average third wave Najdi Da'wah student is in denial. No, Ibn Abdul Wahhab didn't consider himself to be the only Muslim group in the world. Yes, he did. Go read his writings and look at what he did. Look at his level of understanding when he said, and this is quoted from his writings, when he said, no one understood tawhid, including any of my teachers, before I came along. This is what he himself says in his own writings. This is a level of fanaticism. And the takfir is a level of neo-Kharijism that I simply cannot tolerate. To consider the entire ummah to be kafir and mushrik other than yourself is not mainstream Islam. And so I believe that I was taught a version of his da'wah, that's third wave, because third wave doesn't teach that, right? Third wave is much better than first wave. Third wave is still kind of sort of, it's removed much of the fanaticism of the first wave because they have to. I mean, you can't live in the modern world. The second wave beginning tried to, right? King Abdul Aziz literally had to turn his secular troops against his religious troops. There was a civil war between the ulama, basically, and between the secular Baddu followers, the Bedouin followers, that their loyalty is to the secular Abdul Aziz, not to the religious figure. There was a war. What was that war over? The war was over the interpretation of the Najdi Da'wah. And the first Najdi Da'wah basically was eliminated, thus giving rise to the second Najdi Da'wah. But even the second Najdi Da'wah, it was still too fanatical for living in the modern world. And so by the 60s, that too had to be toned down immensely. Now we have the third. Dare I say we're witnessing a fourth wave if you look at the current guy in office, but I don't want to say too much because I do want to get a Saudi visa. So we move on to your next question.
Sheikh, as a follow-up, going back, because would it be safe to say that you kind of built your brand on the works of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab?
In my